Hello and welcome. Today we've got something special for you. So sit down, take a ride, and enjoy. Hello and welcome to a video that most people out there thought would never see the light of day, but it's finally happening. It's time for the Spider-Man Clone Saga 101. So sit down, stick around, and enjoy. Now, in order to understand the Clone Saga completely, you gotta kind of look at where Marvel was coming from at that time. Sales for Marvel books were down. DC was soaring in sales because of their huge hits of both Nightfall and The Death of Superman. So DC were seeing strong numbers in their stuff, and Marvel wasn't seeing nearly as strong numbers. And so Marvel decided it was time that they had their own mind-altering, comic experience, that would span through a certain amount of issues. Supposedly under Tom DeFalco to finish an Amazing 400. So what happened? What we got was the Clone Saga. Now the Clone Saga originated in the 70s with this issue here of Amazing Spider-Man number 149, which is actually the first appearance of the Spider-Clone, which would later bring on the Scarlet Spider. What it is, it's the Jackal creates a clone of Spider-Man and basically sends him to battle Spider-Man. Spider-Man beats him, and in the battle he helps Spider-Man. They save Ned Leeds from a bomb. Jackal gets killed, and then the Spider-Clone gets killed as well. So from issue 149 to 151, it's kind of Peter Parker dealing with the fact that he had a clone, kind of thinking to himself, well, am I really the real one or not, type thing. He does get a test done and then decides not to read the results of the test, thinking to himself, I am the real Spider-Man, I know I am, and then eventually in Amazing 151 disposing of the body of the Spider-Clone inside this huge smokestack of an old abandoned building. That's what happens there. Now, fast forward to 1994, and Marvel, desperate to get a good story out there that would keep its readers interested, and they wanted to have it surround around Spider-Man, decided to start what was called the Clone Saga. The Clone Saga starts in Spectacular Spider-Man, which is kind of ironic because I read Spider-Man books as a kid, every now and then picking one up, I never had a subscription or anything like that, and if I could find one at a local grocery store or whatnot on a newsstand, I would buy it. Or get my mom or my dad to buy it, but never had like a current subscription. So in the 90s, I actually went out and got a subscription to Spider-Man at a local comic shop. Even comic shops back then, they were few and far between. So I went in there, a big Spider-Man fan, and my brother had read Nightfall, and he loved it. He's a big Batman freak. So I was like, all right, cool. Well, I'm gonna read the new Clone Saga. I'm going to read the new Spider-Man books that are out there. And the first book I read was Spectacular Spider-Man. And the issue, the storyline Predator and Prey with Scorpion. And ironically enough, that was the first reappearance of Peter Parker's clone. Coming back to New York, coming back to Midtown High School, seeing things and all that. But we never really knew who this individual was in the beginning. It was just like a mystery character. You see little glimpses of his hair, his Midtown graduation ring. You didn't know who the guy was. But, he was obviously coming back and was going to impact Spider-Man. So ironically, the first issue that I actually read of Spider-Man on a continual basis with a subscription to the comic book was in fact the return of the clone. After a while, we got to see that he was a clone. And by then, we learned the reason why he was around, ultimately, was an event that was going to happen in Amazing 400. Now, what happened is he came back because he heard that Aunt May had a stroke and was sick and dying in the hospital, which Aunt May will eventually die in Amazing 400. Only to be retconned later on, but, you know, for sake of this video, this is where she dies. So the clone comes back, and pretty much decides to himself, well, I'm going to make myself useful, so I'm going to don on this new costume, which he in fact took without buying. Stole the costume, well, part of it, the hoodie anyway, and Web of Spider-Man 118, and we have a new hero born that the tabloids dubbed the Scarlet Spider, who is aka the Spider Clone. Now, the thing you have to understand about the Clone Saga is it's not like a Nightfall or something, you know, where it's just, you know, it takes place within probably like within a year or something. This saga was stretched out from 94 to 96. I believe it's like December 94 to like October 96 or something to that effect. Might be wrong in the dates, sorry, you know, if I don't have it on top of my head. Just going by what I remember here. And this will ensue some battles in the beginning between Spider-Man and the clone. And this will become a huge story arc called Maximum Clonage, in which we try to reveal once and for all that who's the real clone between the two of these. And naturally, you know, everybody thinking Peter Parker, the Spider-Man that we knew and we loved, would be, you know, the real guy, and Ben Reilly here. Scarlet Spider took the name of Ben Reilly. The clone took the name of Ben Reilly, which is actually his Uncle Ben's name and his Aunt May's maiden name, so Ben and Riley. So he took that name. Anyway, so he takes the mantle of Scarlet Spider. He's Ben Reilly. He fights Spider-Man a little bit in the beginning. Then later on, they start to actually team up a bit, you know, because there's a whole lot of new weird stuff happening with villains. Judas Traveler, a few other weird guys. Some other the Spider clones are in the picture now, because naturally you can't just have one clone. You can have like 500 of them. So really, you're going to see like a Kane Spider side, other clones like that, and it all meshes and everything. It kind of gets a little confusing, and when Maximum Clonage comes out, it gets really confusing. And Maximum Clonage spans, I can't remember how many issues now off the top of my head, but I know it's like between 1 and 1,000. And the whole thing just really, it starts to convolute a bit and all that. But luckily, in the end, you know, we get a result. And the result is that Spider-Man, Peter Parker, the guy that we knew ever since this issue here, as the real deal, is actually the clone. So Peter Parker is revealed to be the clone, and Ben Reilly is now revealed to be the real Spider-Man. Everything from that point on, Ben Reilly and Marvel Comics here, as you'll see right here, there's kind of like a mini reboot happening, and Amazing Spider-Man becomes Amazing Scarlet Spider for a month or two. I can't exactly remember how long it was. I think it was, yeah, 2 months. And same thing for all the other titles. Y'all become Spectacular Scarlet Spider, Web of Scarlet Spider, and all that. You know, Marvel thinking, you know, they're going to make some money off of this stuff as it was coming out. And then ultimately we are shown here that Ben Reilly becomes the new Spider-Man. So Spider-Man is no longer Peter Parker. It's now Ben Reilly. And he creates a new costume, as you can see here, which first debuted in Sensational Spider-Man. Here's actually the action figure just came out of Marvel Legends of the Ben Reilly Spider-Man. So Ben Reilly becomes a new Spider-Man. Now, at this point, apparently, I don't know why, because, you know, the Clone Saga is absolutely the best thing to ever grace comic book pages. There are some people out there that actually complained about this, and I don't know why. I mean, because personally, you know, it was just pure genius what they did. And so they complained, a lot of people complained about the fact that Ben Reilly was a new Spider-Man, and eventually it was decided that there was going to be not a retcon, but they were going to do something in order to bring Clone Saga to an end. The storyline, which was supposed to only last probably about 10 issues, was now in its second year. And yeah, they didn't really know how to end it. So what they did is, in the end, they decided to, the only way that anything would actually make sense would be to bring back Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin, from the dead. And, which is awesome, I mean, whew, who saw that one coming? Anyway, Norman Osborn comes back from the dead, and it's ultimately shown, in the end, that Norman Osborn was the whole puppeteer behind everything. You know, he puppeteered the Jackal to create the clone, you know, to make Peter's life miserable type thing. He also created clones of Gwen Stacy too, which I didn't mention earlier. He created all these clones type thing, you know, in order to make Peter's life miserable, and he was puppeteering the whole thing all along. And finally, when a Green Goblin reveals himself as the big man behind everything, he also reveals to Spider-Man that Ben, that Spider-Man, is actually the clone. And the real one all along was Peter Parker. So the real Peter Parker, who had gone through all of this stuff since Amazing Spider-Man 149, was actually the real Peter Parker. And subsequently, the clone Ben Reilly dies in the final issue of this saga, which brings back Norman Osborn. He dies in the fight helping out Spider-Man, and then we're left at one and only true Spider-Man. So yeah, so that's pretty much the way the Clone Saga wraps up. This is a very vague description of it, because there's a lot of stuff that happened, you know, between the issues, but a lot of stuff convolutes each other, and it's a little confusing, but confusing in a good way, because the Clone Saga is absolutely the greatest thing ever created. Now, the other thing that I forgot to mention here is, along the lines here, Mary Jane actually got pregnant. And so when Ben became the new Spider-Man, it was good for Peter. Peter could go out, live a normal life, you know, be with Mary Jane, the baby, and all that. But, you know, subsequently, Mary Jane had a miscarriage, and yeah. So, yeah, Peter had more trauma in his life. Because, you know, the guy needs trauma. Because he doesn't have enough of it as it is. So pretty much, that is the Clone Saga in a nutshell. Started in the 70s. Clone was thought to be dead. Clone comes back. Clone's revealed to be the real Spider-Man all along. Peter goes on a hiatus. The clone takes over being Spider-Man. Green Goblin enters the mix, reveals he's the mastermind behind everything. Eventually, the new Spider-Man dies, revealed that he's the clone, and the original Peter Parker was the real Spider-Man all along. Who would have knew? Now, another thing that kind of happens, I'll just touch quickly on this, is the whole Spider-Carnage thing happens between this. Ben Reilly gets infected with the Carnage symbiote. And I know people have asked me to do a Spider-Carnage 101 and all that. There's not really much to say about it. Pretty much, Ben Reilly gets the costume because it escapes Ravencroft through pipelines, gets on John Jameson, and John Jameson meets up with Spider-Man, and so he gets infected by the symbiote. The only thing the symbiote basically does to Ben is gives him ideas of kill Peter Parker, kill Peter Parker, kill the clone, kill the clone, kill the clone. And eventually Peter has a conversation with him, realizes that the symbiote's on him, and finally Ben is able to fight it off. I personally find the Spider-Carnage character in the comic pretty weak, not much to it at all. It wasn't meant to be a big revelation or a big, you know, any kind of a big event. It was kept to 4 comics, very simple. Not much to it. Nothing nearly as complex as the Spider-Carnage in the animated series, in the 1994 Spider-Man animated series. That Spider-Carnage, a lot more loony, definitely, than this one here, and I find the one in the cartoon series was a lot more interesting than what we had in the comic books, because in the comic books there really wasn't much to it. So, that's about it for the Clone Saga. As I said, it's a very rough overview of it, of one of the greatest storylines in the history of Spider-Man. So, until next time, guys, never forget where you came from. Later. Finally, it's been done. And they never suspected a thing.